So today's talk is based on some teachings that I have read by Pema Chodron. For some reason, I am able to hear her message better than some other teachers. I don't know if it's because she comes from a similar culture as I have, if it's her experiences in the roles of being a woman in America, of being a wife or being a mother. But sometimes she has a way of reaching me that some other, especially academic folks, don't. I hear it in my heart. So all not dedication, all my words come from her. And I want to tell you why this message might be important, and then go a little bit more granular, and then come back out again. So when you hear repetition, it's intended. Another thing I've learned is when I hear a message, I hear it fine, and then I hear it 6 months later, and I'm aware that the words are the same, and I'm hearing it differently. So I hope that you all are able to hear some of these words differently, if not for the first time. First, I want to start with a little focusing, a little body focusing. If you're able, and if you have a chair back right near you, just lean forward an inch if you have a chair that's supporting your back. And gently roll your shoulders back 2 or 3 times, opening your chest cavity. Just 2 or 3 times. And take this time to breathe in and out slowly, using your abdominal muscles and your diaphragm to support your breath. And as you become more focused, tune the ears of your heart to the listening channel. So there's 2 words I'm going to use today, and sometimes in culture we use them to mean the same thing, but they really don't. One is reaction and the other is response. So if you break that down, you have reaction. Action, that's you're doing something kind of transactional. Somebody asks you for something and you do this. You're expected to do this and you do it. Automatic. Response is more of an intentional, thoughtful, what am I doing here? So when you hear those words today, I want you to remember reaction is automatic. And response is, what am I doing in this second? So just remember that. It's going to be important. Those words are not interchangeable in this talk. So an overview for the talk, and I didn't write this, I'm actually reading it. Pema Chodron uses the Tibetan word Shenpa, Shenpa, to refer to the quality of getting hooked in an habitual pattern that causes suffering. Now, we've talked before about suffering doesn't mean the true suffering of somebody has cut your arm open and you're just dying over here watching it bleed. Suffering just meaning a distance from contentment, or something is annoying you. I notice that more in me when my jaw tightens or my stomach hurts, or in particular, when my diaphragm starts to close. If I am not able to take a full breath with the support of my abdominal muscles, I know that I am in that quality of getting hooked, in that quality of causing suffering. So when that happens, when we have that hooked, some people notice feelings of defensiveness or anger or resentment. We start spinning off stories in my mind, in our minds. So, for example, there's this homeless man at work. I work in an alcohol and drug facility, and there's this homeless man, and we told him to come in at 11 o'clock on Friday to be admitted to the facility. And I said, he is not coming in. There's no way he's coming in. Do you know what? He came in, and he was told to bring all his belongings for 30 days. And he walked in with the clothes on his back. That was all he had. He said, I am so ready for this. I was so sure he wasn't going to come in. I knew in my head, I knew in my heart, he wasn't coming in. We were wasting that space, that bed, on this man who wasn't coming in. He wasn't there at 11. He was there at 11:04. He was there. So I had spun a whole story in my head in response to my reactions to him. Nope, sorry, in reactions to him, not in response to him. Those are stories that spin in our mind, in our reactions. So sometimes we don't know what it is that sets us off, but we can notice it in our bodies. That is all natural. It's part of human nature. If I hear a gunshot, I notice a difference in my body. I tighten up. I look for a safe space. That is really good. I'm going to keep that up. That is not something I need to work on changing. But our reaction to other situations may be to avoid a feeling of discomfort. The reaction could be out of proportion to the event at hand. It could be harmful to others because we are responding in a less than loving way. We are reacting in a less than loving way. And it's most likely what we perceive to be happening from an historical emotional trigger that's not present in that moment. Learning to live with that discomfort and not react in our historical ways, but pause and respond in ways that resonate with our aspirations for that relationship, with our aspirations of living a life of loving kindness. That is the purpose of this talk. Joe came up with another really good example of our egos going on autopilot yesterday. For those who were not there, he was talking about our smartphones. And we have all these smartphones that can connect us. I've had conversations with both my brother in England and my daughter in Japan. It's amazing. We couldn't do that years ago, or we couldn't afford to do that years ago. But if we are on airplane mode, we can't connect with the outer world. So when our smartphones are on airplane mode, we just react. The phone can't do anything but what it has done in the past. It may be able to replay old episodes of TV, but it can't get the next episode. There's no Wi-Fi to reach outside of itself. There's no way to connect to my daughter or my brother. It just replays old tapes, replays old behaviors. Our ego, or I don't know if you guys saw the screensaver, but that little baby, that ego functions on airplane mode. It knows how to do things and keeps doing the same thing over and over again because it knows how it works. It knows what to expect. It knows how to do it. It doesn't take any energy. It just does it. It knows it. It's perfect, except that it really isn't. So the way we go about doing things is habitual. We do things that we've learned in the past. It's just normal. It's entrenched in us. We've done it over and over again. It worked for us once. It worked a second time. It worked a third time. Maybe it doesn't really work, but that's not the point. The point is it's in our realm of what we can do, and we just do it, just naturally. It's very automatic. We function on airplane mode. And yet we've all experienced a time when something can trigger us, whether it's a homeless man that walks in wanting treatment, or a noise, or a tone of voice, or a smell, or your mother-in-law. That actually didn't happen to me because she died just 2 weeks after we were married. But you know, those types of things, something that reminds you of something, it changes you in a second. your mind can rush to that story and spin that story, and you're in that story. You're judging whatever's happening in the perspective of that story. It pulls you up, it draws you up, it pulls you away from what's right there. Pema uses the image of a fish hook. I've been fishing a couple times, but I didn't really like it. But I love to knit. I love weaving. And so when I think of pulling threads, it feels to me the same as a fish hook. You pull the thread and it really distorts the fabric below. It pulls you away from what is supposed to be this beautiful image. And then your mind goes off into, well, how do I fix this? How do I make the tension perfect? How do I save that very expensive piece of silk? You know, you go in all these other places and not what's in front of you. You're not responding to what's in front of you. So Pema talks about Shinpa as the charge or the urgency behind our thoughts, words, and deeds. The charge being, I've got to do this right now, or I need to do this, or I have to say this, or else. Any one of those things, any one of those nows. It's the urgency behind that. It's not the words. We all have those words. But if you're in line, this has happened to me, unfortunately, too recently. If you're in the line at a buffet and somebody takes the last piece of pie that you had your eyes on, I mean, it was mine. It was there to be mine. In my head, I'm saying, you idiot, you got my pie. And I don't wish good for you. And I rejoice when his card doesn't work at the checkout line because it reinforces the fact that it was my pie and that he's stupid. And I really hope that his credit card doesn't work so I can have his pie because that was the way the universe was supposed to be. See how all this is happening in my head? Such judgment, such urgency. That's not what the situation was. So the energy of the reaction in my mind was the Shinpa, the emotional, the physical charge that very seductively lays open another well-used strategy of reactions that my ego has cultivated over time that makes matters worse. I am wishing somebody harm. I am escalating my discomfort and my tension. I am justifying the fact that that pie is mine. And there's nothing wrong with the Shinpa. It's completely natural. And we can change it. So Pema talks about 3 different steps. Notice the Shinpa. Catch it. Notice it. You just have to notice it first. And then when we do catch ourselves, watch out, because our ego is really smart. It has found a way to trap us again by saying, oh, Susan, you've been working with Joe for 4 years. You shouldn't have thought that. What an ugly thing to say about that man who got the pie before I did, and wishing that he looks like he can't use his card because you were actually in that spot 2 weeks ago. And we've been meditating all this time about loving kindness, and you're glad that he is looking like an idiot because he got your pie. So I'm blaming myself. I'm condemning myself for realizing that I had Shinpa. Ah, my ego is so clever. So that self-condemnation is another way that the ego was trying to pull that thread, trying to pull me back into its own stuff. And if I said, yes, but he really did get the pie, that is another reaction. It's not a response. It's not coming out of a choice. It's defending the automatic pilot. So these automatic methods and the reactions that worked previously aren't a response to the situation at hand. They are not in sync with the aspirations and desires that we have for ourselves and our community. I mean, yeah, the pie really kind of did belong to me, but all the stuff that was behind it, the wishing he looked bad, the he was an idiot for getting it, and I was wrong for meditating and still thinking that that he was a bad person. That's not in sync with the aspirations I have for my relationships with other people in our community. It's not in sync with the desires I have for other people in our community. That kind of automatic reaction hurts us also by cutting off the wisdom of our heart. What I've learned by being together with you guys, what I've learned in my community in Nashville. And it cuts us off from my basic goodness, from our basic goodness. So catching the Shinpa and noticing it is one way of helping to change our communities, our lives, our people. So step one, as Pema says, is to notice the Shinpa and catch yourself. Part two is pause. Breathe. You might not be able to change your thoughts, but don't do what is automatic. Do something different. And what you do may not be the right response for that particular situation, but it is something different. And what I've learned about myself is that when I try to do something different, it takes more energy and more time for me to do the different thing than the reactive, quick, automatic thing. So I try to pair that new experience with a behavior that works well in that environment. When I know that I want to pause and not just respond, I try to take a breath or a sip while I am opening my heart again. I also drink water because I've been diagnosed with dehydration, but sometimes this buys me enough time to get more close with my heart, with my basic goodness, with the wisdom of my mind. So that pause really helps. Do something else. When we act on the habit and react to get relief from the urgency of that ugly sensation, that cuts us off from our true nature and cuts us off from the possibilities that there are in that relationship, in the world. That reaction blocks our wisdom, our strength, and our choices. Living with that feeling is also very difficult because we want to scratch that itch. We want to get rid of it. If we scratch it, we relieve it. It relieves the unease, the restlessness, the need for vengeance to act or say something. Scratching it leads to another round of suffering. And I think Pema even talks about scratching the itch being related to poison ivy. You just want to scratch it so bad. It feels so good. But the thing about scratching with poison ivy, there's several things about that. One is it's going to hurt later. It could spread to you. It could spread to other people. It doesn't really help except for that second. So it's a second of wonderful feeling and spreads venom and poison everywhere else to you and to others. So it just leads to another round of suffering. It is harder in the moment to sit with that suffering than it is to scratch it. And getting hooked in those old manners often means an automatic response that strengthens our habits, that strengthens our anger, our blaming, our shaming, that make us more and more unhappy and probably engenders other people being more and more unhappy. It just brings on more judging and more criticizing. But when you can respond, not react, but respond, you are practicing loving kindness. So one thing you can do when you do sense that getting hooked, acknowledge that that feeling is impermanent and fluid and passing. Our thoughts and our emotions are of short duration. If we don't throw gas on the fire, we're always moving through it. If we do throw gas on the fire and literally react, we're just causing another cycle of more reaction, more fire, more things. And that's not always that helpful. So when trying to put this in practice, I try to, as I said, take a sip of water or take a breath before I speak and before I react. So it's more about responding than reacting. Reacting doesn't mean living with it. It means something automatic. And then the third step is making this exploration part of a new life. How was that new way of looking at things? How was that response? Did the other person respond differently than you thought they would? How was it for you? So, oh goodness. Last year, my friend said something that would trigger me, and she knew me well enough to know that it would trigger me. And I recognized the tightening of my chest and my inability to take a breath, a big breath in the tightening that I had. And I knew I was getting hooked. And I took a sip of water and then I responded. And it wasn't the best response, but it was different. So I wasn't on automatic pilot. Yay. Um, Later in the day, I really thought about what I had done and the whole thing. And I realized that as I sat with those feelings and processed it, um, that pull wasn't as urgent as it had been before. And I was really proud of myself for doing something different. What was interesting to me was her response to that was to get really angry because she couldn't predict what I was doing. And that really hurt because she came at me with a vengeance. So there are sometimes consequences with being real and in the moment and not reacting. Um, but I realized that I have worked with some of my reactions and responses, and that I came out with a more honest, uh, truer world that I want than with a reaction that was typical. Um, she didn't like it, but I don't live with her. So, uh, oh, I got myself off track now. Joe, that's what happens when you go off text. So notice your reaction in your body, notice your mind talk, turn off the airplane mode, the automatic pilot, pause, sip, breathe, and respond to what's right in front of you that aligns for your aspirations for this relationship right here, right now. Respond to yourself with compassion and love instead of self blame and the judgment of, oh, I should know better. I did it again. That's going to happen. The more and more we practice, we're going to tell ourselves, I should know better. I did it again. No, that's not okay. That's another way of our ego controlling ourselves. We are learning. We are all beings on a spiritual path. Love yourself. Have compassion for yourself. The self blame is just another mind game. So, my challenge for everybody is in the next 24 hours, turn off your airplane mode, your automatic pilot mode for one or two interactions. Align you with your aspirations for that particular relationship in the world and respond in that situation to that person. even if it's irritating. Irritating is the hook. Look to get unhooked.